In this lecture, we're going to see how you can test components are correctly emitting events with the correct payload. To save a little bit of time, I've already set up the test. You can see I've imported mount from view test utils and I've imported app from app. And we have a test here, emits a count event with the correct payload. Let's go ahead and take a look at the app component and see what that looks like. So it's a fairly simple component. It is written with the options API, but we are going to see this with the composition API as well. We have a single button, and when you click on the button, it's going to call the handle click event. When we call handle click, it's going to increment count by 1, and it's going to then emit a count event with the count as the first payload here. So let's go ahead and see how we can test this and make sure everything is working correctly. The first thing we're going to need to do is see a new method on wrapper, and that's going to be emitted. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a console log here on wrapper.emitted and see what we have. And at the moment, we haven't emitted any events, so it's currently an empty object. Let's go ahead and click on that button and see what happens next. So the first thing we need to do is call wrapper.find. We're going to find that button so we can click on it, and then we can just trigger the click by calling trigger and passing in click. Let's go ahead and save this one and see what happens. We're now getting a count event. So you can see because we've emitted a count event, we're keeping track of it here. This is going to be an array, and every time we call the event, it's going to keep track of the correct arguments. In this case, the only argument we have is the payload of 1, so it's going to be there. If we go ahead and click on the button again, we're going to see two entries in there. The first one is going to have a count of 1, and the second one is going to have a count of 2. So let's go ahead now and see how we can write a test to make sure everything is going to continue working correctly. All we need to do is say expect wrapper.emitted, and we're going to grab that count event. We're then going to say when it's called for the first time, the very first argument is going to be 1. So I can just say to be 1. Let's go ahead and move this down here, and we're going to expect this one to pass. If we save this off, everything should be passing, and so it is. Let's go ahead and have one more assertion just to make sure everything's working. In this case, we're going to be looking at the second time count was emitted, and then it's going to become 2. Let's save it off, and everything is still passing. Definitely a good place to be. You don't just have to have one argument here. It's possible to have multiple arguments to a single event. Let's go ahead and see how that works. So instead of just having count down here, I could then pass another argument, for example, hello, and then we'd expect to see this in our count tracking as well. And you can see there it is. So you can have as many arguments here as you like, and you can make assertions against those ones as well. Now that we've seen this working with the options API, let's see how we can refactor this to the composition API. And because we've written those tests, we're going to be confident everything is still working correctly. To refactor this, the first thing we need to do is go ahead and create a setup function, which I'm going to do here. And then we're going to turn count into a ref. So I'm going to create a new variable called count that's going to be equal to a ref, which is initialized to 0, exactly the same as it is in our data function down here. The next thing we're going to do is create our click listener event here. So I'm going to create a new function called handle click. That's just going to be a regular anonymous function. And we need to then increment count by 1 and then emit the event. So the first thing we're going to do is increment it. I'm going to say count.value is plus equal to 1. And now we're going to emit the event. The way we do that with the compositions API is by grabbing the emit out of the second argument to set up in here. Now we can just say emit. We're going to emit a count event, and we're going to pass in this as the argument. So it's going to be count.value. And this should be all passing if we've done everything correctly and we haven't made any mistakes. Let's save it off and see what happens. We are actually getting an error here. That means I've made a mistake. And what I haven't done is remember to return handle click from my setup function. So my tests are actually protecting me here. They've made sure I haven't forgotten to do this. And because we had these tests, we were able to catch the error as soon as we made a mistake. If I go ahead and return handle click in here, everything is now going to be passing. So everything is now working correctly. Let's go ahead and quickly revise the test. So you can see here, you can call wrapper.emitted. That's going to give me a list of all the events that have been emitted. It's going to then give us a list of each one that was emitted. For example, I'm looking at the first event here and the second event down here by accessing 0 and 1. We can then access all of the arguments using an array index as well. So I'm only interested in the very first payload here, which is going to be the count value. We can see now everything is working, and we have our test, so we can move forward with our development with confidence.